Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Hospitality Digital Marketing live show number 175. We're just racking up the numbers. Woo! With me always is the amazingly talented, totally gifted brainiac of all things hospitality. Myself, no, Robert Cole.
Hospitality, you're limiting it to hospital. Oh my God, no, that's all right.
Right. Omnipotent knowledge of all things.
Oh, now the knower of all things.
Yes, now the knower of all things is joining us.
Ed Stone. Oh, there he is.
Look at the beard going on, Mr. Ed.
Whoa!
I am the knower of all things. It's my my Christmas beard that you're enjoying right now.
Well done, Santa. Now,
Yeah.
we've got a question. Was your birthday this week?
It was.
It was this week, and
Holly
Tim's,
today is
Holly's.
getting a facial and a spa treatment and everything. She says she's pampering herself today for her birthday.
Nice.
So.
Yes, Tim and I share the same birthday.
You do.
You were right, Robert. I thought it was a couple
Alan
days apart, but
Alan Young as well. All three of you. I think.
That's right.
Wow.
So my first thing I do every day on my birthday is send a note to Tim and Alan, wishing them a happy birthday.
Oh, I did not.
So
realize that.
when the comet passed over that day, that boom, that's what happened. It just circles that day's a magic day for all of us in the world.
That's right.
Tim had number 50. Though
I had number 39.
39. Wow.
Yes. Yep.
Robert, where does that leave us?
Year of
Where
my
does
30s.
that leave us, Robert? What number are you doing?
I'm going for number 60 in January.
Holy smokes!
Holy
January what?
I'm going for number
January
5.
9th.
I just hit 57.
January 9th.
What are the old guys? Hey, tell you what.
You guys are really old. My mom is turning 60 on January 26th.
Yeah, well, we've seen it all, done it all.
Or 25th. So Robert is older than my mom.
Wow. That's
Just saying.
that's all right.
All right, folks. And now you know. This is the hierarchy of how we are.
That's all right,
and,
Well, actually, I don't believe I have felt so old until yesterday when on a HSMAI marketing advisory board call. Actually, Holly was running, and they were doing this thing that they're setting up for the conference. Like this, they're running through this test of this live polling thing that they have. And the first question was about 2001: A Space Odyssey. And like a bunch of people, some of the people didn't even know what the movie was. It was like, no. And 6 people like hadn't seen it. And this was not a big sample size. I think more people had
But
not
most
seen
importantly, how many of the people would have even been a teenager had the movie actually been in 2000?
And I saw it, and I saw it in its original. I saw it in its original release in Cinerama, which is a large widescreen, great format in 1968. I was 9, but it was unbelievable.
Well, I don't know if you guys picked up on the gentle jab I did at Holly on her Facebook post when she was asking where everyone was when the day they found out that John Lennon was killed.
Yeah.
And my answer was,
I saw that.
It was 4 days before my first birthday.
Yeah. and I was studying for finals at college, my senior year, I believe.
all right. Well,
Yeah,
with that being
amazing.
said, I think actually Mr. Robert has some intriguing topics of today.
You think? Does that mean you did not read his email?
We have Valen
I think
Perini.
he does. I think
Valen
he does.
Perini submitted a request to speak. We have Tim Peter joining the room. Another
Would you look
birthday.
at that.
Here we go.
Big 5-0 Peter.
Woo,
There we
Mr.
go.
Tim. Did you see my belated happy birthday for you?
On Facebook?
Yeah.
No, I haven't been on Facebook yet.
Oh, see, I was trying to be cute because I actually hit it the day after. I said I wanted to make sure I sent it to you when you were sober.
I've been sober since, about 11 a.m. yesterday.
That's the first in how long?
Wow.
Did they give you a chip for that? For that short of a time period?
Tim's still doing. Tim is still doing a
Did
shot.
Tim and
a shot for
Valen
every year.
speak
I know.
this morning about what they were going to wear? I mean,
Exactly.
you guys are really coordinated.
Tim forgot
Really?
the scarf.
Where's your scarf, Tim?
Tim's
What?
frozen in fear.
He's
Tim's
stunned.
frozen in time.
He's stunned.
He says Valen wore it better.
Exactly. Or it better.
I assume that was me who froze.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was stunned into silence by that, Ed. I didn't have a blue scarf, but I also couldn't figure out how to wrap my watch around my neck. I
Yeah,
tried.
see, look,
I
so
tried.
coordinated.
I tried, but it only
Twinning.
worked for it worked only for a very short period.
It's
Yep.
Amazing.
Happy birthday, Tim.
Thank you very much. Happy birthday, Ed, by the way.
That's right.
Thank you.
Ed's staying under the radar on this one.
And
That's
Yeah.
right.
and Holly's birthday is actually
Holly's
today as
today.
well. This is a busy
Look at
Oh, fantastic. Well, there you go. See?
Yeah, it was a good week in the world of.
Yeah, Tim, you missed it. We had the whole conversation on how you, Alan Young, and myself share a birthday.
Oh,
and,
fantastic.
and Ed pointed out
I knew you and I did. I didn't know about Alan,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's
and
great.
Ed
Yep.
pointed out that you're turning 50 and he just turned 39. So he wanted to underscore that point. So
Well, what I've made
But
it
to
a
make
point
you feel
tell
better,
people
Tim, to make you feel better, we also found out Robert's turning 60 on January 9th. So I pointed out that Robert is older than my mother. So, who turned 60 on January 25th. So,
There you go. There you go. Well, I like to tell people that my 21st birthday was celebrating its 29th birthday.
Nice.
Oh, very nice.
nice.
What's really great is watching people try to do the math. Like,
Take
wait,
care of
I'm
the two, drop the one.
right, exactly.
I'm dying to see what Mr. Ed says about the top story that Mr. Robert threw out there about operations and revenue management and the collision course of destiny that we're about to face.
Well, first of all, we all know nothing drastic ever happens in this industry. So should we start with the toning it down that, there is no drastic change. I don't think in history of the hotel industry has there been a single drastic change.
Right. That is. Well, no. I seem to remember when Ellsworth Statler opened the first Buffalo Statler Hotel in 1908. It was
Robert was a bellman there.
Yes, he was.
See, I actually think this is I think this is a telling moment. Because I think, and we've talked about this on the show before, this is not new. We've talked about this many times when we look at consolidation and things along those lines. I think brands are in some trouble in the longer run, right?
Yes.
Like the biggest competitive threat to brands is not other brands, but is hotels, unflagging altogether, is going independent. And I think that this is a bold statement. Maybe not the first, but one of the first that we're seeing where people are starting to say, wait a second, you're paying a lot of money in franchise fees. You're paying a lot of money to brands. You're paying a lot of money to management companies. Maybe you are better off, figuring out how to get rid of those fees rather than reduce them, rather than just lower your cost of distribution and the like. And I think that's something that's going to be a trend we should be watching pretty closely as we go forward over the next few years.
And again, I think we should talk about it by type of hotel owner. If you're a REIT, you're going to fly branded flags in anything that is not a historic or unique location/building, just because it will perform with a baseline expectation, regardless of who the staff is, who is managing it. You're sacking some of your upside potential, maybe. However, that's by also raising the floor of what that asset will do substantially. So when we're talking about the audience of owners that have a meaningful question to ask themselves on whether or not they should fly a flag, we're talking about not the REITs. We're talking about people who their business is being a hotelier. Yes, if you're a hotelier who owns a hotel, I think it is a reasonable question, but I think it's been a reasonable question for quite some time on whether or not the value proposition is strong to pay all those fees to be part of a brand.
Well, where I think it's going to get interesting, and and I'll shut up and let somebody else talk, but where I think it's going to get interesting specifically is the one thing the brands have done a very good job of and continue to do a good job of for a lot of folks, is access to capital, is access to financing, right? I mean, I think what the brands have done poorly is telling that story of the value that they provide beyond just heads and beds. Now, is it a value for every property? No. Is it a value for many properties? Yes. And I think that's something they need to work on to say, where are you going to go? But if we're seeing solutions come into the marketplace, we're starting to see some interesting solutions come into the marketplace that might get people access to capital in different ways, then that could truly be a deal breaker, right? Not a deal breaker, a game changer, right?
Yeah, but they've got to be careful for just relying on things like that, because look at the restaurant business, right? Well, and not in terms of really the franchising, but you have a lot of restaurants that would, used to go to major purchasing centers, right? There are all the Cisco's and things like that. All of a sudden they decided, wait a second, we can send one of our employees over to Sam's Club or Costco every morning. and there was
and you can call it locally sourced.
Exactly.
Well,
That's
if we
right.
want to talk about
From warehouse club to table.
That's right.
if you want to talk about parts to play, if you want to look at the little chaos, I guess, of all the butterflies fluttering at this point, is you have a few mixes into the metrics. You have this thing with Marriott that happened, and there is going to be fallout about the GDPR and whatever legalities come from franchisers being held accountable, or maybe ponying up against a brand and going, hey, you didn't protect my back, or I'm being chased, or whatever those things come out to being. You have this brand saturation going on with the mega mergers of Marriott and Starwood. And so you have a lot of people that are competing with now, or they have to be friends with people they were competing with. So there's a lot of franchise angst in some major markets. And then you have this component that there is possibly a financial considerations if the economy does begin to decay, that there's going to be pressures and considerations as to the cost of being associated with franchisers. And you start putting these small pieces to the puzzle together, and the picture can begin to look like even reps or people that normally standardize their relationships with a brand, cookie cut, boom, box on the road. Now they're going to say, you know what, wait a minute. The tools have changed, the dynamics have changed. Maybe we should reconsider how we approach the financial and how we look at these hotels. I mean, it could be these small pieces that come to a bigger picture.
And so speaking to that too, when we're talking about where the brands are kind of shooting themselves, this immense focus on providing marketing services and then actually creating friction to not only use the brand's marketing services, I think is starting to bite them. I don't know if a lot of you deal a lot with management companies, but I've noticed over the last 2 years, the major management companies have started reorganizing their internal services to put much more focus on providing the same types of services that you can buy from the brand.
Yes.
Right.
And that I believe is a reaction to, one, the very premium cost that the brands are putting on these marketing services, even though it's my understanding a lot of them are outsourced because they can't yet fulfill.
And the mediocre results because they're homogenized too. They try to do it on a scale that doesn't give any creativity to the individual property.
The moves the brands have made to try to drive hotels to those services by eliminating their ability to have vanity websites, which actually, when you look at a hotel that had its own vanity website, also was running its own marketing to that vanity website. Mm-hmm. Well, now all of a sudden, if you're a hotel in a saturated market for your specific brand family, it's pretty difficult to make the decision to run any type of paid effort into the brand portal because there's always a path to discover the other hotels in your market.
Right.
And it's hard to measure the success too.
Right.
It's almost impossible.
That's right.
So I think this little circle that was probably created with the idea of creating a revenue bump while also getting the benefit of control ultimately could be like the first real large tug at the string of the brand's overall position with a lot of their franchise holders.
Yeah, and I think there are two big things that have changed in the last, I'd say, decade or less. One is the technology stack. There's a lot more options out there at a more affordable price, right? So it used to be you going with a franchise model, you got all that and there was no headaches. It was just plug and play and they negotiated good fees. But now with all these cloud-based solutions, you can enter the market with a complete tech stack.
That's exactly
very,
right.
very, very affordable. You don't need the franchise to supply that. And then the other side, on the marketing side, and Tim talks about this a lot on his podcast about how the barrier to entry is lower, but anyone can market now. Now you have to be good to market well, but there's so many tools out there that allow us to think about just distribution, right? How an individual property doesn't need a franchise to get distribution anymore because they can go directly to GHA or TripAdvisor or Expedia or Booking.com on their own, and they can get the eyeballs that really was the big value proposition from the franchises before. So with those two big changes, there's a big question. Like what value is the flag providing that I cannot get on my own anymore? And
so now there are a couple.
Lower cost.
There definitely are.
I think there are a couple of brands that are actually actively solving problems that I think have some strong upside potential. One of my favorite ones, which I think only opened their first location recently, but it's part of a bigger franchise group, is Signature Inns, which is a new brand for Red Lion. Which I think the problem they're solving is how do you take these exterior corridor, 2-floor motel, old buildings and make them hip, meaningful, and speak to a crowd that will spend more. I think that's very interesting. I think G6 is doing some very interesting things with Motel 6 in reestablishing that brand and its identity. And then also from a tech stack perspective, I think they have one of the better tech stacks of all the major scaled brands. So I while we talk about maybe the potential downfall of certain brands, I think other brands are actively solving real problems. Like, what do you do with these old buildings that you can't justify blowing them up because they're made out of steel reinforced concrete, and they're not in an area that can support a $400 a night ADR, which is what you would need to tear down this hotel and build a new one. So
when your cost per key is going to be is going to be $2,000 or something like that, or $10,000 rather. Getting that back is going to be awfully hard, right? When you're in a $79 a night market, right?
Yeah. So while we do talk about the downfall of certain aspects of large scale brands, I do think there are brands that are serving a purpose that has been underserved for a long time, and so I think you'll see. Interestingly, I think you're going to see a shift in brand success from it.
And that may be something that that would make the guy who wrote the new profitability article a little happier, right? Because the large brands are becoming, larger, but as they grow larger, they're becoming more bureaucratic, they're becoming less innovative, harder to get things done, harder to find how to move, harder to respond to market changes quickly. And these smaller brands can. Right. I mean, they can move somewhat more quickly. They can be more responsive to concerns like he has. Whereas, the big boys, there are ships that take months to get them to change direction.
Well, and they have to drag all those other franchisees around with them, right?
And if they're
say
public,
nothing about the investors,
that's
right?
And they've got their shareholders that they have to deal with.
Well, and because they're public, they're also making decisions that large public companies make, which usually are not great tactical decisions. They're bringing in the top consulting firms to consult with how to fix some of these issues. Well, we all know the top consulting firms, these giant firms, do not exist to solve problems. They exist
not to solve them cheaply or quickly.
Right. They exist to eke
Having
out.
been one of those before.
Right. So when you look at that and you look at the fact that some of these brands that have scaled to the size they have did so without addressing their foundation first, which I think is true for, definitely Marriott Starwood. That scale of merger was wrought with infrastructure issues, which I believe I won't be surprised if this latest issue isn't pointed to some form of it had something to do with the connection. more so than it had to do with either of the core infrastructures.
I don't think so. I think that was a pure Starwood. Well, and now they're attributing it to the Chinese hacking in, so who knows what the source was.
Right.
But,
That was a very convenient article.
That was.
Did anyone like put together that maybe it was sour grapes due to the Chinese entities losing the Starwood bid? I mean,
I am waiting for the earnings call where they simply update the South Park song "Blame Canada" to blame China.
Yes.
China.
Blame China. You know.
Right. It is so
Absolutely.
convenient.
No.
It's such a convenient excuse.
But here's
very true.
here's my theory on it, and I think the reason they discovered it was the merger. So, with the merger, they realized that they certainly were not going to move all of Marriott's portfolio onto the Starwood platform, right? Everything was going on to Marcia and under the legacy platform. So Marriott has all sorts of routines and things like that. They're running for security, and that's great. And I believe when that stuff moved over, that's probably when they discovered something going on, right? Because they either found, hey, what are these big files over here that nobody knows about, or here's somebody's off.
Well, there's a whole lot of
Who
data
knows, right?
flowing to this CDN.
You pick up a bag and it's leaking. Is that what happened? They picked up, hey, this got a hole in it.
So, but I think, and it's very hard to actually, I think, to hack. Not that it's unhackable, but the Marriott's core reservation system is so old, it's hard to hack. Right.
Well, that's
they have
that's
trouble
the
getting their
benefit.
own developers in to be able to do stuff.
Right. So the one side of it where it's probably crushing as they're trying to move to more modern ways of doing certain things, but they can't because their core infrastructure is not designed to speak to anything outside of itself, is also a benefit that because you can't actually connect to it, there's no path in to hack it.
That's exactly right. But all these hackers are going, wait, what's an airline tip?
Right.
It's a joke that's funny to about 5 people, by the way, but that's okay.
Okay, so going back to Valid a little bit on one thing, and I think it's a good point to make with this. We know that there's eventually going to be a downturn. There's not going to be a continually progressive growth market. When that happens, who's to know? Everybody has their ideas. But this layering that's developing in these bureaucracies, this multi-level combinations, and we know that within the bureaucracies of the brands and so forth, they have their favorite ships and they have their unfavored ships. They're going to take care of some before they take care of others, no matter how much they have to bring everybody along. From a hotelier's point of view, a takeaway from all this is, remember when we used to have crash kits at hotels that when your power went out and you still had to operate, you had to have the credit card ching ching thing, and you had to have ways of getting into rooms with keys and so forth. Maybe there's a lesson to be learned as to a predication of all this is start developing how your strategy would look and what resources you can actually address should you start needing to directly communicate with whom in the organizations. Because face it, a box on the side of the road with a Marriott flag on it may talk to a account manager, but that account manager is just a portal of communication. They're not a facilitator. They're not an actual doer. They're just allocated out to another department to do the 5 keywords for their market and what have you. Start lining up how you actually do business so that if something does happen, you have your quote crash kit ready, that the process that you need to continue operating in that space of, can I market myself? Can I do good business? Can I run effectively? How do I communicate if I have issues or technicalities or what have you? Make sure that crash kit's kind of set up. Not that we're portending fortune and doom.
Would that crash kit just be having a emergency retainer with either Lauren, Tim, or Robert?
Oh, I do have this amazing program for 19.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say yes. I would not say yes to that, but I would say hell yes.
Yeah. Well, the only reason I think of that is I recently a friend of mine who owns a small hotel in a market was about to buy a bunch of really garbage stuff and I said, well, what are you doing? And he's like, well, I need demand. And so I referred him to Lauren, and Lauren did a market assessment on not just this hotel, but all of its comp set, which is in a market that you would think some of the comp set at least would be doing something. And Lauren's findings were that none of the market that this hotel competes with are doing anything to try and drive demand.
Right.
They literally are like Field of Dreams businesses. If you build it, they will come. And I look at that
parking lot. Yeah.
Right. And I look at that, and this is a market that you'd be surprised that that's the situation. So I wonder when when we start seeing even the tiniest of pullback, I wonder how many hotels are in this current situation where they're just being present. They won. How are they going to transition to actually having to compete for demand? You know, it should be interesting to see what happens from there, because also, you know, what Lauren's finding is cleaning it up's not as easy as it sounds, because they're dying death by 1,000 paper cuts. Like every time he uncovers something, there's nothing here. Okay. So you need this basic 101 business thing before you can do anything else. You know, and again, this isn't a market that you would think is a highly competitive travel destination. And you're finding that the entire comp set is doing nothing to control their own destiny.
And I think that, you know, the last downturn was long enough ago that there's not a lot of sort of economic knowledge or, you know, sort of economy knowledge in these properties to understand what to do, right? Because things have been good for a long time. So you've had, you know, you've got salespeople who, you know, were in college or were in high school when the last downturn ended. And so they've never sold, for example, in any other type of economy that hasn't been moving up year over year.
Which is ironic, because that was the same thing like post.com bubble, like .com bubble 9/11 time.
Right. That's
And
right.
most of the sales people in the sales orgs of the hotels had never actually had to compete for business. They just had to hold their share of the market growth. And watching the entire industry scramble to figure out how to actually, you know, compete for more demand than you know they were.
Look what happened to Robert when he lived through the Depression. When Robert, after you lived through the Depression, you know, didn't you like always keep pennies in a jar and stuff? You know, never get caught again.
You always
were
kept
talking
a box
about
of apples and pencils ready to sell.
the crash. You're talking about the crash kit.
That was his crash kit.
Ed's mom and I would remember back to the day where you just look at the brass keys in the little wooden box.
I
And,
was there.
Right.
No, but
you just got the things down on the guest folio out of the bucket, or you know, flip the little occupancy thing around in the rack.
Yeah, take the quill and write down on the book, the parchment paper. Yeah, no, but to Fallon's book, very good point. You know, 2001. I remember when I was in Key Largo, I was down there 1 month before 9/11 happened, and literally everything dried up because people forget there was the anthrax thing right afterwards. So you had a double hit, and it really just crushed it. And for them, they used to just people would line up at the door. They never sold anything; they just answered phones. And all of a sudden, we went back to talk about last week, Tim. We're talking about, you know, having to fire people. First round's easy, second round's hard, third round's painful, fourth is you know. And we're going through this process, and the salespeople are like, "What are we doing?" It's like, well, there's still people moving and still people dying. So let's start reaching out to funeral homes, start reaching out to realtors. You know, let's start getting what we can get. I mean, it's a strange thing to say, but you got to go out and start digging. And 2008, same thing. And to that, there is no muscle memory for finance for some of these people, and you can actually tell the difference when you're talking to people if they lived through that when they had financial responsibilities. If they lived through the 08, there's always this pensiveness as to leaving something in the cash behind. When you talk to people that don't haven't lived through that process financial responsibility wise, then they're like, yeah, well, let's do all this. Well, what if it doesn't work? Yeah, well, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You know, there's going to be more money coming in. It's like, no, those times don't always run like that. So, yeah, very good point to make.
Well,
it is an interesting thought about how the business cycle is driven by like new blood coming into the right. I mean, the business cycle is driven by people who came in and don't know any better from a certain perspective. I never thought about that before.
But look at the systems. Okay, so now you have revenue management systems that are driven by AI. That's great. Hey, this intel. Well, what data has that AI been trained on?
That's right.
Everything going up, right? That's going to be interesting.
So to go back to Robert's quote of 2001, what are you doing, Robert? Don't turn off the water, Robert.
But that raises a really fascinating point. You know, if you train, this is a really fascinating point. You know, when you think about this stuff, you know, we have told the story many times about the chatbot that Microsoft put out on Twitter that learned how to be racist and misogynist and sexist and stuff in you know,
minutes.
A day. Minutes, yeah. You know, or there's a very famous story about Watson, which they were training to diagnose diseases and things along those lines, and then they realized they weren't training it with the best doctors, so what they were building was a very mediocre doctor. You know, and what people
Exactly.
forget is when you talk about the training data for AI, you can easily build artificial stupidity too,
Mhm.
That's right.
right?
Well,
Yeah, very true.
actually, Red Lion at their annual conference came out with a housekeeping robot.
Did we all?
Right?
Did I freeze?
No, you're good.
No, just
No,
you,
you're
Ed.
fine.
I think it was just my topic, just the riveting
Yeah.
attention. Just suddenly, yeah, I had to do so. But this robot, they basically have, it's going to help housekeepers. Well, they kind of said ultimately it's going to have its bumps and things like that. Ultimately, it's going to get up to about 3/4 of the efficiency of a human. And you kind of go, well, okay, I can save the labor costs of the human, but why do I want something that's going to be slower and kind of bog things down?
right.
Is not exactly what you want to focus on. So,
Right.
um,
Well, actually, it's
So-
funny that you raised that. That's a topic that everybody's shying away from. I got called by a reporter the other day, and some of you know this, but I got called by a reporter who wanted to talk about the introduction of AI, the introduction of robots and things like that into the market and what effects it would have on the labor. And literally,
Oh,
what
yeah.
was great was I reached out to my network, I talked to everybody I know, and every single person went, "Nope, I am not being quoted in a newspaper or a journal article about that topic at all. Thanks
Ever.
very much."
those people need to talk to somebody I'm happy to talk to. I already have. So
But it was funny
that's my
because
kind of topic.
what I do wonder about is, look, I think we all agree there's certainly some sort of slowdown coming, and at least from my perspective, and I could totally be wrong about this, but this is probably going to be more of our typical slowdown where it's not going to be everywhere all at once. It's not going to be, necessarily massive. It's going to be, right? Typically slowdowns in this industry, if we ignore 2001 and ignore 2008, which is quite a statement to make, but, typically individual markets get hit. And then as they start to recover, other individual markets get hit, right? It's every hospitality market is local and has its own challenges.
It's how most it's how most economies
It's how most
that
economies.
Right.
Right.
it's not all at once. It takes disaster to do all
But-
at once.
Yeah, but
Right.
the last two downturns have been disasters. So
Yes,
So
but
for me,
fortunately,
it's-
the recovery from the last one has been super slow, which
Right.
generally, if you follow economics, you know that the slower the recovery, the longer the period of prosperity is, and the
And the
slower.
softer the landing. Yep.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
Yeah.
we can all
So,
hope.
but what will be interesting is to pay attention to what happens to labor from that perspective, because
Right.
I think we are going to see some, people look to, well, how do we eke out another couple points of productivity here? How do we eke out more points, on labor and stuff like that? How do we reduce the cost there? Since that is and I'm kind of opposed to that on one level, actually a lot of levels.
But removing the hospitality from hospitality?
Well, for instance,
Oh, yeah.
that would be one of the
Why
big
would
ones.
that be a bad idea, Tim?
I would think that would be, not the brightest thing we've ever done.
I think
but
the
I think
shelter
that's something-
industry is a temporary shelter industry really has a nice ring to it.
Right, exactly. We're gonna have pitch your own tent glamping. That's just not gonna work. Something about that's gonna be very odd.
I can show you a couple of companies that would disagree with you on that.
But nonetheless, I just think that's something that we want to pay really close attention to, because I think that will have very long-term impacts in terms of what people expect from their hospitality experience. And that's, troubling from a bigger picture.
Yeah, and even if it does trend in that way, I think it's an opportunity for those that don't want to embrace it and want to go
That's
the
exactly
opposite
right.
way and go all the way into I'm a hospitality business and it's all about personal touch.
Yeah.
So I think that'll be
Absolutely.
the focus. You'll probably
Which,
see
to
a
tie
split,
it back to
right?
this
Some people
article,
go on-
may be some of the problem the brands are going to see, because all the two marquee brands that have always been known to being hoteliers recently decided to no longer be hoteliers and just become franchising companies.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's right, which possibly leads us to
It
a
does,
second
actually.
topic, which is Louis Vuitton.
Buying Belmont.
Hennessy has acquired Belmont for
I think it makes
$2.6
perfect sense.
billion.
It does,
Yep.
actually, and the article laid out the argument for it really well. It's very clear. As millennials are becoming less brand and less interested in wearing an expensive Swiss watch, but we'd be very interested in vacationing in a village where the watch company originated, as an example, have a hotel in that place, right? So it's very. I thought once I read that article, I had a better understanding of what the buying company's strategy was. I thought it was really, really great.
Yeah, I think it's really smart.
And this is the value of the underlying real estate, because Belmond owns a lot of their properties.
Right.
That
right.
price, $2.6 billion, is what? About a fifth of what Marriott paid for all of Starwood?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Mm.
When you start thinking about that, that's a pretty interesting number for what, I don't know. I don't think Belmond has more. They don't have 50. Maybe they have 50 hotels. I don't know what the number is.
They've got about 50 or 60, I think. Yeah.
But
Yeah, okay,
yeah,
so let's say
to
they
your
have 50
point,
hotels
they're buying the
versus-
building and the land, right? So
Right.
Oh,
Right.
36, by the way. I just found the number 36.
Oh, 36. Okay. Yeah. So 36 hotels versus what was it? 900 or something like that under the Starwood brands. That's a pretty big, focus of their. And of course, when you're acquiring these companies, you are acquiring their cash flows, right? And that sort of thing, those revenue streams.
You know, one thing I'm not
interesting.
sure about on this, by the way. When they acquired the who owns Orient Express as a brand name? Because they
Orient
acquired
Express does.
Orient
Orient Express does. And that's what created Belmond, because Belmond decided they didn't need the Orient Express or whatever. There was a falling out, right, between the two, because whoever owns Orient Express, I believe, was thinking of starting up their own hotel, or hotel group, that sort of thing after this happened, which I don't think really occurred. But that's when they went to Belmond, which was not the most well executed launch and positioning and that sort of thing. I mean, they really dropped the ball when they
when you're trying to take over, when you're trying to take over for an 80-year-old brand, I mean, that's it's like new Coke, right? Like, this is a difficult thing to do well.
I just think they were really arrogant too, that I think they felt everybody knew what they were, and because they're so deeply invested in these properties, and they are fantastic properties, that they just thought, we'll just go do this, we don't have to.
I think that's a mistake that this industry makes a ton. That the average traveler actually understands.
Yep.
Like, who the stakeholders are, well, I was being nicer, but I mean, let's be honest, go to the average traveler and even use one of these marquee sub brands of some of these bigger brands and ask them what family it belongs to.
They're not a clue.
Well, and LVMH owns Bulgari, right? And Bulgari is actually one of the Marriott brands. So they're
Marriott.
So it's a licensed, sort of deal, and they own most of the I think they actually own all the properties that are currently in the Bulgari portfolio, sort of thing. So it's an interesting sort of thing. And again, I can think back to 1984, 85, where the single Bulgari store was in the lobby of the Pierre Hotel, which was down 42 floors below where I worked.
Which was by a leading hotel of the world.
No, it was near a leading hotel. The Pierre was a Four Seasons hotel at that point in time.
Oh, at that point, okay.
Yeah, Tim, he's talking horse and carriage days, not.
That's true. You're absolutely right.
And he's still bitter about having invested in the Buggy Whip company.
Actually, I've got whenever the topic of the Pierre comes up, I always have any hotelier who's listening who complains about the complexity of their owners, or the owners and the asset manager and everything's just so difficult. No. The Pierre was about a 300 some room hotel, except there was a very contentious acquisition or flip, basically, from who had it before? Trust House Forte had it before, and they locked out 80 Parkview rooms in the sort of thing, right? in the dispute, which is not a nice thing to do at all. So that's a problem. But the ownership of the hotel, because it's a co-op, the owners of the hotel live in the building predominantly. And it's not one of these floor by, the top 12 floors are, no, it's room to room.
Right.
Sort of, owner, guest room, owner, sort of thing. Very, very interesting place, which also you had this beautiful ballroom on the 42nd floor, just absolutely phenomenal. It had been shut down in the 60s. We're talking pink bandstand with these starburst chandeliers, which was used for storage. Right? There's just like, just junk boxes and stuff up there because the owners didn't like the traffic on the or in the elevators, right?
It's a modern day condo hotel. I mean,
yeah.
No,
their
top
Sandestin
floors.
Resort. I mean, most of Stewart's clients, like that's the situation. Yeah.
But also in the top 2 floors, my office, and then the ball, which was in the converted foyer of this ballroom.
It's
and
a foyer.
Sold.
Stop being fancy.
For a 5-star hotel.
It's a Pierre. It's a foyer.
It's a foyer.
It's a hotelier.
It's
You're a
hotelier.
hotelier.
But Robert, wasn't your office underneath the stairs?
When you look at the wait,
All right,
look
so
at
wait
the
a second.
artwork.
Can we bring the show back to the show for a second?
I think we crossed the bridge at this point.
Yeah, let's go back to a topic.
So here's a question for a topic. Do we think that this is something we're going to see more of as a trend in terms of lifestyle brands starting to get into this business and say,
Listen, I mean,
hotel.
if you guys haven't caught it, well, Graduate's a perfect example of a super awesome lifestyle brand.
Sure.
If you look, Margaritaville is no longer going to be licensing their brand. They're actually building a franchise. That's a amazing lifestyle brand, really getting into travel. Seminole Gaming with their Hard Rock stuff, they're not licensing anymore. They're franchising. Actually, I mean, you kid, but they're actually in that business. Like that's the funny thing. So these strong either retail or lifestyle brands are starting to realize that there's quite a future for them in hospitality. Mm-hmm. So I think you're going to see quite a bit of it.
Especially because they keep reading every single report that comes out says millennials, all they do is travel. They don't buy stuff anymore.
Right.
And everyone's trying to get the experience.
That's a great point, Stuart.
So groups like Restoration Hardware is building their own things. I mean,
I'm surprised has taken so long, just because by nature, like if you're a really high end furniture manufacturer, how are you not at least operating a hotel somewhere so people can come and really experience your product? Like, and let's face it, most hotels marketing looks like furniture catalogs anyways, because there's no people in it. It's just rooms full of furniture.
And some of
which is an article I do want to get to, but I want to go back to a couple other things about the butterfly flapping things. You talk about jobs and the fact that manufacturing, after this, whatever has been happening with Trump stuff, these manufacturing companies, especially automotive, is shutting down a lot of manufacturing plants because there's no small cars being bought anymore. Well, gas prices, whatever, these economies that, and you figure most people that bought those small cars were the more youthful people working their way through life cycles of getting cars. And you think, well, most of them now just don't even bother with it. They Uber or Lyft, and they really just looked at the fact that their travel is based on their needs. Well, I'm not saying all of it. I'm not saying it's a defining factor.
There's another point there that you have to talk about.
Okay. Go ahead.
There's all the things. There was a great article the other day. I can't remember if it was in the Wall Street Journal or where it was, or the Atlantic, but it was all about. And there's a lot of data that's been shown up over the last 6 months that backs this up, where they said that how millennials have killed this and millennials have killed that and everything else. The article quite rightly pointed out that millennials did not kill the economy. The economy killed millennials. The problem is that they have not made as much money to this. Well, I mean, hear me out. They have not made as much money to this point in their lives. And remember, we're talking. I keep talking about them as adults under 40. These are folks who are 22 to 37, right? Like these are not old. These are not teenagers. These are not college students. These are young adults and now, regular adults, real full-size adults.
Full-fledged,
have not made as much money to this point in their lives as prior demographic cohorts had when they were those same ages. And so the things of not buying cars and the things of not buying houses and the things of not taking big vacations and all this other kind of stuff, they like to travel, but they're not doing the same sorts of things that we saw people do in prior generations because they don't have the money. And
Right.
that's when you do, and because of the time value of money and compounding interest and all that other kind of fun stuff, right? If you get a 10% raise off of this kind of salary versus a 10% raise over this kind of salary over a 10-year period, you're poorer. So this is going to have longer term impacts on the economy that are really something we need to watch for.
Well,
for the
imagine
long
when
term,
they get to
right?
retirement age.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If
Yeah,
or
for sure.
or never, right? I mean,
Or
when
never,
they
as
don't
the
get
case
to
may be.
retirement age.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
Right.
and the other side though is that interest rates are record low levels, right? So
Right, just
the
to add
ability
insult
to
injury, right.
buy a car, right? To
Right.
buy a car and get a low, car loan or that sort of thing, or buy a house and get a reasonable interest rate, things like that. That's not gonna, be. And
Right,
again,
that's not going to be true. in
since
5
I keep
years'
talking
time.
about the good old when I got out of college, a woman who graduated with me came down to Dallas, needed to have a car. She got this nasty car. Her interest rate was 21% because
Oh, yeah.
that's all she could afford.
Yeah.
It was for this old Toyota. I mean, it just horrible. But she had
I
to have a
remember my
car with
in-laws.
functioning air conditioning, right?
I remember my in-laws buying a house many, many, many years ago where their interest rate on their home was
Mhm.
18%.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I got one of the first adjustable rate
A
mortgages.
long time ago, man.
I bought a condo in 1982, and the interest rate was the first adjustable rate one, which is why I wound up getting it. It was pegged at like 2.5 points over T-bills or something. It was 14%,
Yeah.
and it eventually went down really low, which was great.
Right. But I mean, this
it was
could
absolutely
create a lot of
insane.
challenges
So
for
as
our
but as
industry.
yeah,
over
and
the
as
longer
interest
term,
rates
right?
go up, that's going to be worse. It's going to
Right.
get really, really bad.
And
Right.
all of this caused by finally the rest of the world recovering from the last World War. Like that's actually what's caused all of this problem. Interest rates were so high back then because we were still the stronghold of manufacturing because most
Yeah.
of the world still hadn't recovered their core infrastructure
see.
manufacturing.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, but that's really like if you really want to look at where you can trace all of this to, that giant span of prosperity in the United States, that now seems just constricting no matter what we do. It's because the rest of the world has finally recovered
Right.
their
They're caught up.
infrastructures and economies to catch up to where, we don't. There's very few things that we're the economic powerhouse in. And so that also compounds to this massive group of millennials, coming through during a time of financial crisis, and facing the realization that, it's a completely different game now.
Right.
Yep.
Right. But
Well,
it does
and
raise.
the debt, right? The U.S. debt that's not a good situation if other countries own a lot of your debt. Case in point, the Suez Canal. Take a look at that and see what happened when the U.S. didn't like how things were going, and basically Eisenhower went to the U.K. or went to Britain and said, hey guys, you do this, we're going to start selling your bonds because we own all of them and your economy is going to crater so badly and we don't really care. Sorry,
And
Stuart.
they had that meeting in a conference room at the Pierre Hotel in 1980. No, anyway,
But within 4 days, I mean, done.
No, sure.
Invasion of Egypt with France and Israel, done. Right? They just stopped.
Right.
That was before I was born, just for the record.
You weren't
He
like
means
palling around
He means
with
born
Anthony-
again. That
It was only
before
3 years
converted.
before I was born, but
You
still.
weren't palling around with Anthony Eden as you guys, divvied up the soup. So
Exactly.
the Levant.
Yeah.
So anyway, the question though is when we talk about lifestyle brands and the like, I think it's a really smart play because it sets these hotels up, to be part of the guests, part of the customers' experiences, no matter where they are. Right? You can get a little piece at home, you can get a little piece when they're on the road, you can get a little piece, when they're in their car.
Real
et cetera.
loyalty.
Build brand loyalty to a brand, right? I like all of these different aspects, and so when I travel, even if I travel less, you're getting larger share of wallet because you're getting larger share of wallet from all the different pieces. So I do think there's a lot of possibility there in the long run.
There was an article you threw up, just to sidestep out of gear for a second, about photography. Tambourine threw up. I don't agree with all of it. Well, only one aspect on it I don't agree with. Most of it I do agree with. They made several points about photography in hotels and what you should do.
Yes.
I think the article is, we took 1 million hotel photos. Here's what we learned. And I'll just read through some of the statements that they made. Don't undervalue skilled hotel-specific photography. And they're referring to being centric on the product itself. And when they say that, the other is, do hire separate specialists for architecture versus lifestyle. I would fracture that statement a little bit more, and I would love to know what, Stuart, how you feel about it, because you have to deal with this space as well too. You know, it's not so much about lifestyle and architecture as the way they define it. I think it's more about demographics and interest in the product. You sectionalize your imaging based on who you're trying to get
Personas.
But I think it's still lifestyle, right? Those are bucketed under lifestyle. I actually agree with everything they said. I thought it was a well thought out article with a very brilliant headline as well, and a good grabbing your attention kind of a headline. We took 1 million photos. Sounds really cool. So, but no, I agree 100%. And I think the biggest one for me, which is the one that most people make the mistake on, is the talent. In almost everyone, when I show them the price for a photo shoot, and we don't mark it up, we just go and help them negotiate deals with photographers and talent agencies and give them the raw costs. When they see that talent cost, especially when you start adding in, you know, you got to keep them overnight. If it's multiple days to shoot, you got to feed them, you got to get stylists. That's where most of the money goes into a photo shoot. And so a lot of people are like, screw that. I'm just going to do which of my employees want to do it. And it always ends up worse if you do that. It's
I can actually say with 100% accuracy that every time we've gone cheap and got an employee to do it, that employee ended up terminating, and we didn't want them to be the face of the product. It has never ever failed.
Another risk.
We've gone internal, and that person ends up not staying there, and unfortunately probably left under bad circumstances, and we can't use everything we just did and spend time for because we don't want them to represent the product anymore.
Well, just the releases and everything like that, right? Having the rights to their image and all that stuff.
Yeah, you want the release, but you'll get a lot more photos, and you'll get a lot more high quality photos if you have professionals in there, because they know what they're doing. You know, they know how to stand, they know how to look. There's a lot of minute detail in photography that people don't think about. And, you know, it takes a lot of prep and a lot of patience. And, you know, especially when you've got the front desk managers' kids running around like lunatics because you need
both things that aren't a strong suit for this industry.
Yeah.
Prep and patience.
And don't hire amateur talent either. And I say that with the caveat being that I just went through this in a New York hotel where the general manager wanted to help a friend of theirs that was entering into the modeling business. And we couldn't get around it. And I couldn't find. I got all of 6 seconds of a piece of a video that took 3 hours to keep telling the person, this is how we want you to walk. We want you to glide your hand over the edge of the bed as if you're feeling the texture of the fabric and how good, comfortable it is. And you're trying to explain these things.
And they're going like, soft head.
I think it's one of those things where people oversimplify the skill that is required, and it sounds weird. But you know, if you were to film a movie, you wouldn't say, "I'm just going to get friends and family to be in the movie." The actors have a skill, and models are the same way. There's a skill to it, and the more they do it, the better they get. And photographers are going to get better results if they got professional models.
And
every
it goes
time.
for photography.
I'm finally glad to be recognized.
Well, in the early days, when Nor1 would sign up customers free standby, when we went down to implement, we would take photographs because properties just didn't have a good set of photography. And so if they didn't have anything, we would send a photographer. And I mean, the guy worked for us and he wasn't a pro, and of course our images are usually just thumbnails, you know, up on a confirmation webpage or on an offer page. So they didn't need to be spectacular. But once I started working with some of our bigger customers, I was like, no, they all have image repositories on Leonardo or ICE or somewhere else. I'm like, why are we doing this, right? Why are we taking inexpert images? And sometimes there would be people in there. The hotel would say, the GM would say, let me get my assistant and let's have her sit down at the table in the bar or whatever. And we'd say, sure. You know.
Now, one thing with this article, I want to say that is it was a big omission on this part. I mean, I understand the focus they had on the type of photography they're talking about is the other types of media that you need, the 360 shots, the elevation shots, and to something Ed mentioned just real quickly earlier, put people in the pictures. I mean, going back to the tele process, put the life of the hotel into the picture, not the static. Here's our lobby, barren and empty, as if we don't have a piece of business in the world.
I think there's two caveats to that. I don't think you put people in the bed, and I don't think you put people on a toilet. But other than that,
we're still in different hotels.
I don't know. I've been seeing a lot of images of people in bed. I saw one this morning.
Food, eating in bed. Yeah, eating in bed is one that we
or reading or
kids,
something like that.
Having kids in bed.
Kids in bed.
Reading, done correctly, I think you can
I think
do it.
on the bed, maybe. I don't know. Not in the booking process. I think in the lifestyle kind of selling.
Okay, I'll definitely say that.
Fine, but
I think for
in the
lifestyle, luxury, and really low-end hourly, I think are the two sectors.
You almost like I want to.
Again, it's all
certain
about
hotels or the clientele
it's
is
about customer personas, guys. You've got to focus on the customer persona.
That shot of Stuart that goes in the highlight reel, right?
All I'm going to say is you make fun of really low-end hourly. However, I was brought in by a lawyer friend of mine to look through an asset that he received because the hourly hotel owner didn't pay his legal bill. And that hotel, between its on-books and off-books revenue, was averaging almost $300 ADR.
Oh yeah,
Well,
that guy wasn't paying his legal bills. He wasn't paying because he didn't want to. It wasn't due to a lack of cash.
Six
That's why
dollars.
clients tend to average 187% occupancy.
$6 was their quarterly cleaning budget, by the way. $6.
Alrighty,
Big profit center.
But going back also to photography, I want to add one other thing other than just pictures to this, and that is for all hoteliers, please have a highly do a great vectored logo. If you don't have a brand, if you're running with a brand that gets your logo, please have a high quality logo.
I think you should have 8-bit pixelated, looks like it's on a Nintendo system. From
Don't do the Microsoft standard template either.
Paint.
Yes,
the pyramid. Do you guys remember that was the most popular logo that came out of Microsoft, so many hotel companies had that crappy pyramid in their logo, and I was like, man, you didn't even try.
Well, so how many times I've taken somebody's logo, and as I'm zooming it in to try to create a vector, I'm like, watermark what?
Another one for photos. You love the hotels where they use the stock photos and you see the watermark over the
It's like, guys,
but to get tactical for 1 second, I tell people all the time, whatever your budget is for photography and imagery for next year, now, double it. Triple it would be better, but at minimum, double it.
Or at a minimum, have it on your budget every year.
There you go.
Because a lot of people do it now. And they'll say, photo shoot's done. We don't have to worry about it for 10 years. And then the next time they realize they need it, you've got people with like 80s perms and short shorts.
As a shameless plug for Mr. Ed, Flip2 provides a lot of content that you don't have to mess with that can be usable because they handle the process. I mean, you get to use the imaging, and it's lifestyle imaging, and it's used by your guests, and you have full rights to it. So for the usability of social, because there's so many different variable usages of photography. There's the photography necessary for your website and explaining your product, and then there's the photography used in communication of your product, and then that's designed by channel. Are they looking at it from like a YouTube or a video project, or are they looking at it from a photo of social where it's being shared on a Facebook channel or something? So,
well, and I'll tell you, there's a lot of really, really good amateur photographers out there that travel. So we see when you go to really pretty destinations, the stories that your guests could share with you are far superior than a lot of your, we have a lot of hotels that get better guest stories from every aspect of how you would measure a quality image than their own professional. And so that's another aspect to that is depending on the channel, professional photography may even not be what you want.
And I would also add too, one of the things that we've learned from Flip2 using it as well is you get to see what the guests care about with the property and the destination, and that can help lead you in terms of your marketing strategy. And when you are taking photos, you know what you want to take photos of because this is what matters to people. So
And added to an older conversation about micro-influencers, this is a topic of discussion you have with those people you're wanting to engage as micro-influencers, the type of imaging that you want them to ensure that they have of. It's like if you're designating your conversation with micro-influencers for particular demographics, talking to them about the specifics of what they're going to produce in that relationship also talks about the types of images that you're creating. And going back to something that Stuart intended to mean as a good point, don't give us a provocative picture on a bed if it's not it's not, that's not that type
If
of
it's not Tim.
If it's not appropriate,
unless it's an hourly, and then of course it's like, all right, roll it. So yeah, I mean, you got to look at it's a usable tool. Photography is a usable tool in almost every meeting. We talk about this, and also keep in mind too the videography. It's just not the still shots anymore, but it's the segmentations of videos that people are taking as well. Those are highly engaging, and you need to do it where you're not bouncing around holding the phone. There's a quality to it that has to be produced as well for it to be used. And then there's 360s, and like I said, there's a lot there that you have to make sure you have the whole spectrum of the type of media. So,
and you can really tell your personality through the photography. And there's a client we've worked with in the past that does a better job than anyone I've ever seen. As soon as you go to the website, you know what this property is all about. It's called the Hotel Gathering, G-A-Y, the Ring, and it is exactly what you would assume it is from that name. But the photography in there is phenomenally classily done, but it tells a story that it's perfect for their audience. It's really good. So check that out.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
Stuart's in the 6th photo in their carousel.
And the 8th, and the 12th, and the 15th. Yeah.
That's amazing, Stuart.
Well, that's one of the things. One of the things that they waive is Stuart's modeling fee when you sign up for Flip or for Fuel Travel and have them do their marketing. Yeah, you get Stuart.
This is true.
The show's eye candy. Yeah, Valence, since it's been a pleasure to have you. We haven't had you for a while. Is there a particular topic that Mr. Robert threw out that you wanted to make sure we wanted to hit?
Oh, I was a little puzzled by the TED association with Marriott. That's the first I'd heard of it, and I didn't quite get it. So I thought I would ask you, a panel of experts, what am I missing in that article, and what's the value proposition there to be associated with TED for a brand like Marriott? I read the article.
They get to host TED events at their locations.
Yes.
Is that it?
And they're engaged. They're engaged with the people who attend TED events. It's a very, very attractive demographic, right? Because those are not cheap. Or at least the full blown conferences, the TEDx's and things like that, where you can just show up for the
Okay, fine. So you've all regurgitated what was in the article. Is there value here?
Beyond the 2 points you just said?
For Marriott, I think so. Depending on how much they had to pay for it.
Right. So this kind of goes back to the very first article we talked about, right? So this is one of those cost items that is very difficult to manage to understand true ROI, right? What is this really doing for me? And I read that.
Marriott has shown that they're willing to spend a lot of money on cool sounding things without any requirement to go to ROI. I mean, look at all the stuff they did with David Beebe that they magically don't talk about anymore. That was all a huge spend with really questionable return. But it got them talked about in the news, and I bet you it sold them a ton of franchise agreements. Sometimes
I think this is much a PR value as it is anything else, for sure. Aligning yourself with a really positive brand, right? No one has a negative thought about TED. It's just a really phenomenal brand, and I think a lot of people, especially white collar people know what that brand is, So
Yeah.
I think that's a good affiliation. But look at how many articles are getting written about it now, and look, we're talking about it now. So I think that's
Right.
I take it to the darker side of it. I think it is a vanity play, and I think it's indicative of, unfortunately, our earlier conversation to the show of how the large brands are looking forward without taking care of those behind. That there's no value proposition to a box on the side of the road with a Marriott flag on this. There's no asset value variations that's going to happen from this, but it does mean that somebody from a franchise point of view that's considering franchise options, this is a play that Marriott can say, look at the caliber type of what we're talking about. And we know when the C-level conversations, people ask three questions: who's doing it, how much does it cost, how much we can make off of it. If they feel that they can sell the idea of being Marriott brand because of these kind of associations to quality branding like TED, then that's probably the only value proposition.
And if Marriott, and I'm not saying they will, I have no idea if they're planning on this or not, if they really wanted to develop programming around this where they could have, TEDx events and smaller ones, handled whatever, quarterly, whatever the case may be, in their facilities where they wind up bringing people in and that sort of thing, doing it for food and beverage, having guest speaker series, which are, maybe you have, TED speakers who go around and do some things. Those could be beneficial. And again, once you go into a downturn, those sorts of reinforcements of the brand and, hey, I like this and I'm familiar with it and I've been there and that's where we went. Where'd we eat? Where we did the TED thing? That's good. Now again, super hard ROI. I don't know, right? But again, I would say there would be worse relationships that they could
Right.
from a corporate.
And I'm gonna devil's advocate on this one for Marriott for 1 second. I'm not necessarily going to advocate for Marriott generally, but I will advocate on this specific one.
Yeah.
Just to offer a thought, and I agree with everything you've all said. Right, I'm not disagreeing there. I think it's also true. This was something we looked at leading when I was there. Was what could we do to generate more foot traffic through the hotels from the hotels, right? We got all these different relationships, we got all this local stuff. What are other ways to bring in the community and actually help generate, ancillary revenues and things along those lines to the properties, just based on, conferences, based on events, based on other things, silly stuff like stuff. We had our own brand conferences of various kinds. How could we do more content for our properties, with our properties, in our properties to bring people in the door? So this could just also be, I think it's also a PR play. I think that's absolutely true. I think it's absolutely a big value for selling franchises, which really is where Marriott's bread is buttered. And I think it could have some value in terms of just generating foot traffic through the door and some ancillary revenues for the properties that host them. Is it material to earnings for those properties? Probably not.
It feels highly segmented to me, right? Because there is a certain bubbly part of the population that knows what TED is and that listens to the TED radio hour and that may have attended a TED or a TEDx talk, but that's probably a pretty small segment of Marriott's buying public. It's the people who stay at JWs and those types, but it's not, it's not some of the lower scale buildings, right? So it feels bubbly. Now, granted, maybe this is what you're going to say, Robert, which is it's the higher rated end of the segmentation with more money to spend, but.
No, I was going to say that with the coming economic downturn, all those JW guests are going to be at Fairfield Inns and Courtyards pretty soon.
And that's where Marriott's going to have a problem because, quite honestly, Courtyard's got a better bed in it.
Yeah.
How do you get people back up?
Yeah.
And I still don't understand this, why Courtyard has absolutely the best bed in the Marriott portfolio. And once I realized that, I stopped staying at full-service Marriotts. Because I'd rather have a good night's sleep than crappy room service.
Courtyard is a great brand. In many cases, it gets a higher ADR than the full-service Marriott, right? Which shouldn't be happening. But I think Marriott's revenue managers have finally, their cluster managers have finally figured that out to optimize the rates on
Can you imagine?
Basis and not
Welcome to This Week in Hopping Digital Marketing, brought to you by Hilton.
when staying at hotels, go blue. Wait a minute, you can't say that because the Marriott logo.
You can't say that. Okay, now wait. I've got a question. Actually, on that topic, I've got a question for Stuart.
Such a case of the giggles now.
Our advertising and promotion group. Why the heck are all the brands going to blue? Marriott in their mobile app now has a blue, basically
because
a
they
blue
did a
icon.
focus group, but said blue was somehow
Basically,
better,
Hilton,
you know.
They've
Hyatt,
all used the same
Marriott,
focus group,
all-
apparently.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Probably.
and
It'll
all
make
of them
what-
now
it'll
when
make
you
the
launch.
merger less expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Ed's out. No, I'm sorry, Ed. I said Stuart was the expert. I'm sorry.
He got his fingers in it.
He hates when somebody says that somebody's more expert than he is.
Yeah, I
But
think it's just
the
Marriott
other
being
thing
a
is
little
now- Every single one of these mobile hotel apps, when you launch it, comes up with a splash screen in black and white of all of their logos. Even that looks the same, right? It's just
I'm sure there's a
Crazy.
stack of explanations this thick that came from their agency or internal team or whoever came up with it to justify the decision. But at the end of the day, is it making any material impact? Probably not.
I think it's somebody sitting on Fifth Avenue in Mad Men clothes going over and said, what can we make them do now? I know, let's make them all go blue.
but
They had
it
a $1
really is.
bet. I bet I
It
can
really
make-
is disconcerting when you open. Since you said nice things about Marriott, let's slam on them. You open their website, you search for New York, right, and you get 200 hotels, right, and the presentation's horrible. But you open up Hilton, you only have 50 hotels, but it's just as bad, and it's the same bad, right? It's just absolutely.
Yeah, but as long as they're equally bad, then the measuring
That's a
is
good
just
point.
reset.
That's a very good point. Exactly.
I mean,
let's-
they're obviously not
Business
using
is
any
graded on a curve.
Yeah.
So
they're obviously not using any of the data that was outlined in the New York Times article, right? Because otherwise,
you have to actually be able to collect your data in order to use it.
Yeah, exactly. Ed, it is much faster to just make up the data. Then you can just you know the results up front. You can just do it. You can have your talking points pre-made before you have your data.
But
It makes it
you
so much
bring
easier.
up a very good point, Robert, in one way, and because I have clients in the New York market, that is why our clients that can be nimble, that aren't brand tied, can be so effective in market because we can be identified uniquely in the market well before the confusion of brand trying to carry the load of every flavor they have in the market in front of you. You can really get in front of the demographics because they can't. There's no one hotel that Marriott's going to say is good for families in downtown. They don't do those things.
Right.
They talk about 5 keyword specialities for each of their products, and they have to share which one gets what. The brand saturation is painful in that market, and the tiers, and they're even sharing the same buildings for God's sakes. You walk up and it's like, are you here for Fairfield or Spring Hill? Go there for Spring Hill. It's just crazy. This stacking and layering they're doing.
Hilton now has a 3-branded property
Right,
in
right.
McCormick Place, right?
Yeah.
It was a-
And that
article-
franchise salesperson walked out of there and went,
Yep.
caviar
High
tonight,
five.
baby. I sold 3 franchise agreements to 1 building owner.
I am going to Florida. Thank you very much.
Winning.
And the amazing thing is, it's a 400-room hotel. It isn't like an 800-room stack. It's 400 rooms, and you basically go, oh, well, those are. I guess they stack the moderate, superior, and deluxe categories or something, and branded
Right.
the room
Yeah,
type.
I mean,
I
there
don't
was an
know.
article in the trades earlier this week that said this was the trend, right? Two
Oh yeah.
brands in a building, and sometimes 3 brands in a building is, owners love it
Because they're
apparently.
running out of buildings to sell flags to.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So let's just sell more flags to a single building.
And they wonder why there's such a brand apathy going on because nobody cares. It's like
Right.
they're looking for whatever it is, either price or type of design room, and most people don't even know what the variances are in those. I mean, even in Dallas, there's that big one that's Courtyard in Spring Hill, and you walk in, it's like you're checking into which or other, and the elevators for one are over there, the elevators for there are over there.
But there's an element and it's an element and a loft, I think, right, which are 2 Starwood brands, and it's kind of near Love Field, and it's actually a nice building. But I remember talking to the general manager there, and they were like, "Oh," I said, "So if you stay here, where do you go?" "Oh, well, I stay in the Element because the rooms are nicer, but I hang out on the Aloft side because the bar and restaurant is so much better." And you just go, "That's ridiculous. So what are you doing? You're bringing down the rate here. You're going to have to start selling your loft rooms for a
That
lower
goes to the
price.
fact that you have the franchisers that share the same parking lot. Everybody stays in the courtyard but walks over to Spring Hill for free breakfast.
Yeah,
Right.
but this is a bigger problem, right? I mean, obviously, we're all saying this, but huge problem too. This is why the OTA is, because it becomes commoditized product.
That's right. That's
Absolutely.
exactly right. That's exactly
Just
right.
just paint a sign out front
Yeah.
that says, Bob's box of rooms, and call it a freaking
Right.
day.
Or just call it
Right, like-
Expedia's box of rooms,
By
right?
window.
Stewart is taking notes.
Right.
He's like,
Well, I mean, my husband and I drove past. It was a Marriott. It was a Residence Inn on one end, and I forget what was on the other end. Fairfield, I guess, and it's right on the side of 128 in Boston. And we drove past, and my husband said, he goes, "So why do I care anymore about Residence Inn?" And I said,
absolutely.
"That's the right
And a
question
great-
to ask,
Yep.
sweetie."
That's a great question.
Right.
And
Now
pretty-
you should have
and pretty
given
soon,
the honest
and where they're-
response was you cared about residents.
But where they're going to get themselves in trouble is pretty soon, and this is back to where we started at the top of the show. Pretty soon, the franchisees are going to start asking
That's
that
right.
exact same
That's
question.
right. That's
Sure.
exactly right.
And these guys with the multiple branding, it's like they're hedging their bet. Like I'll bet on red and green and blue. It's
Actually,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
if you want to be really smart as a franchise owner, is do a courtyard in half the hotel and independent on the other half.
I've actually got a client that's about to do that. It's
Well,
actually
they'll do
going
an
to be a
autograph.
Marriott.
Yeah.
It is a Marriott brand. I'm not sure if it's going to be Courtyard, and then the rest of their property is going to be independent. So
Yep.
But is
And
it
the-
going to
and
wind
the
up having
chain is
an
letting them
autograph?
fly,
Is it
by
going
the
to be
way?
under autograph or something, or tribute or something?
Well, here's
Like
the
that.
problem. You
Wait,
could
hold on-
actually
hold on
make.
1 second, Ed. Hold on 1 second, Ed, because this is a key question that Robert's asking. Stuart,
Yeah.
the flag letting them do that? The chain is letting them
Yeah,
do that?
that's. I'm
yeah,
surprised by
they're
that.
trying to get in. They're trying to get into the market that this client's in. It's a very heavy independent market, so they're trying to get into the
Oh.
market.
And now you want to talk about Pandora's box.
Oh
Yeah.
my
So
God.
I'm the owner of
Yeah.
the Marriott
Pandora's box of
Marquis.
rooms.
I'm the owner of the Marriott Marquis in New York. Well, officially, the Marriott Marquis in New York is only 100 rooms with no ballroom facilities, restaurants, or anything.
That's right.
However, it does share
the Broadway
facilities
Marquee.
with the Broadway Marquis Hotel, which is a
Yeah.
luxurious 1,700 room independent historic hotel.
Yeah. That's
Wow.
well, you got to figure too. The only time I've ever heard this happen
Wow.
otherwise was I had one guy that had condo ownership, and they allowed them to stay independent because the condos were owned individually. They didn't want to join or sell off their space, so they allowed the inventory they could singularly own turn into a brand, and allowed the condo association to run as a separate hotel.
Which
That's the
condos
only
is
time I've ever
different.
heard
That condos
that.
is a
That
different
is-
thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
assuming that a building that had, like the one that's nearby, Residence Inn and a Courtyard, so two brands by the same company, I was assuming there were shared services in that building, that it was shared house.
Yeah,
Not the same,
there's-
obviously,
Oh, yeah.
not the same amenities,
Yeah.
but basically.
But housekeeping.
gym.
and-
Right.
Yeah.
So how does it
Yeah.
work when you've got a brand on one side and independent on the other side? I mean, how? So Stuart,
They're
from
going to
your-
operate the same way. They get
In the
both-
most
both will
beneficial way
access-
possible to the hotel owner.
yeah.
yeah, right.
But in this case, everyone's going to get access to the swimming, the pools and the water slides and all that fun stuff as well.
Marriott
that's
is
what I would do then.
desperate,
There's your
absolutely
answer.
desperate. They've been trying to
Right,
get it.
really.
Probably, I don't know which market or which property, but they must have been trying to penetrate that market so desperately for so
Yeah.
long.
Last,
Yeah, I'll
last
find
one
out.
Turn off the lights is all I'm going to say.
Wow. As
I'll
other
keep you guys
franchise-
posted off.
You don't think that's going to come into conversations going, wait a minute, you say you don't do this, but right over there you do. What's up with that? You
Right.
know?
I'm going to invite you guys
Wow.
to my 10-room Waldorf Astoria.
No, I'd say one room. This is a one-room Marriott.
Yeah. Oh, what
And if you don't
oh,
like
and what are
it,
they-
we've stacked our brands. There's the one-room Spring Hill right there, and the one-room.
But I'll welcome you to
and the
stay if you
one-room
want
Airbnb
to save some
and
money.
the one-room Expedia and
Yeah.
oh my
You
God.
can
wait a
stay in the
second.
Chateau de Saint Ange, which is connected to my 10-room Waldorf Astoria. I'll even
Does it have
give
a
you.
foyer or a foyer?
I'll give you Hilton honors points
It's a
for
porte
it.
cochet. It's a porte cochet.
Well, but
No,
even
it's a chateau, so it has to be a foyer because you.
Yes, it's a
Yeah.
foyer
Foyer.
that serves chowder.
even better, if you can intersperse the rooms, you can sell that that courtyard room is a full-service Marriott room, is a whatever, a Fairfield room. You can do a lot of stuff
We're going
with
back
it,
to
right?
we're going back to the hotel motel roadside. This is the Elvis room. This is the Washington room. This is,
right. Oh my God.
Yep.
Wow.
That's
comes full circle. Hakuna Matata, the circle of hotel life.
we are approaching the top of the hour, by the
Oh my
way.
gosh, yes.
Oh,
yes,
and
yes,
my
yes.
laptop battery is dying. So
Oh, no.
No,
I
we
am-
have 10 minutes to hit, so we got a rut row. And I do want to say one thing about the food and beverage article you threw up. I think, and this goes back to the fact that I have frustration
up.
with
Oh,
is that a pun for food and beverage?
It really was. It's like I took offense to the
Lars,
article
not that
because this
funny.
is just novelty stuff. Restaurants, if you have good product, good quality, and good marketing, you don't need novelty. Novelty's fun if it's progressively entertaining to the demographics you're going for or to the environment you're creating in the restaurant. But having coffee cups that you can print labels on the top, and that's the way you get people in, to me is a cheap way of doing it. If you did,
Have
good
you
marketing
been
with
to
good product.
TGI Fridays?
Yeah. Well, look what happened to them. The Bible of a menu is what killed them. Bennigan's was the same way. I mean, you get to this, trying to be too many things to too many people, and you lose track of what you were there for to begin with.
Right.
That comes back from my old restaurant days. Like, be good at what you came to market for, and don't try to be everything to everybody.
and if you can do good, legitimate, relevant local stuff, great local chef up and they had the great food trucks. They're doing, whatever the case may be. That's where things really pay off.
So we don't want to miss the rut row.
I thought the Chinese AI article was fantastic.
I was going to say the Chinese
So
AI
interesting.
one is really, really interesting.
I mean, it was
It's
a little kludgy build, but it was really interesting to move through.
Yeah, the stumbling blocks for China's AI. So we'll post it here in the.
The stumbling block for China's AI is nowhere near as humiliating as the stumbling block for Russia's robotic AI, though. Just going to say. I don't know if any of you caught that article.
Mm-mm.
No, didn't see this
So in Russia, they put on this really amazing presentation of this human-like robot run by AI, and it's astonishing. So much so that you actually do eventually realize it's a human dressed as a robot.
That's excellent.
So that's not the same as the animated Chinese newscast, the
Yes.
AI newscast. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Except Russia tried to do it to show their strength in AI, but then they realized they weren't strong, so they just put an actor in makeup and said it was a robot.
That's good.
That's the mechanical Turk. That's the ultimate
Exactly.
That's right.
Exactly. Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Amazon's
All right.
mechanical Turk.
I
Well,
tossed
no,
up
the original mechanical Turk.
That's
The
right.
original mechanical. Anyway, nonetheless, Wikipedia, the mechanical Turk, if you really want to know. Moving on, the rut row.
the rut row.
The Rut Row was a New York Times article
Fascinating.
talking about what's happening with tracking your data, and it is the intersection of convenience versus privacy. And the title was "Your apps know where you were last night, and they're not keeping it secret because they are selling the data streams to third parties, anonymized." What the New York Times came up with, which I thought was really a great thing to do, was all of this stuff is being done anonymously. But what's anonymous? We don't have your name, we don't have your social security number, but we have everything about it. And we know that you tend to spend 8 hours a night motionless in this one spot, and then you go to the and then you seem to move around in this other spot for 6 or 7 hours a day. So they know where you live, they know where you are, they know where you stop on the way, and
Yeah.
crazy Big Brother stuff.
I just
Does
want
anyone
to
else
say,
feel
I
like-
told you so. Is that what I want to say? I've been saying this, that you cannot trust corporate America to do the right thing, and that's why you shouldn't welcome all of this stuff unwittingly into your life.
Yeah.
Hey,
I
can I
do
go on a
think
tangent
you should-
real quick? So
I do
Ed,
think you should welcome it wittingly into your life, though.
there you go.
Yeah,
Ed
that's
and I
right.
were at a conference recently, and we were talking
yeah.
on a panel about AI, and he went off on one of his rants about
What, Ed? What?
Ed?
yeah,
What?
and
Oh,
talking about tinfoil hat, and so at the social event afterwards, literally one of the attendees came up with a tinfoil hat that they had made and put it on Ed and asked him to wear it the rest of the night.
And yet, 5 years from now, when Amazon owns the in-room experience at all these hotels, I'm going to go right back to that person and be like, yeah, I made money off this.
All I want to know, Ed, all I know is when you're living in the cabin in the woods, how in the hell am I going to do a birthday card?
Because you won't be able to use the Amazon Echo to connect with me and watch.
Actually, no.
Oh, you aren't going to get a Facebook.
We'll know where you are. We will know where you are for sure.
Right.
No, he won't have a phone. We'll know where you are because you'll be in the black dot where there's no signal.
Yes.
Right. The absence of signal will point out that you are the signal.
Look at the land beyond Amazon's kingdom. That dark place.
You want to be on Amazon. I can tell you that when I do the rocket program SMAI, and I open up with two videos. One is what WeChat is in China, and the other one is where the New York Times did an article where they took two phones, Android phones, and they have no SIM cards in them, and they put one on airplane mode, and then they traveled around, and then they put a man in the middle and played back the data that was pulled. I always get the gasps out of the audience about what the information was on the one phone that was on, but not in airplane mode, all the detail, but even more of a gasp when they realized that there was actually more data transferred on the airplane mode phone when it finally connected, because it had to keep track of stuff.
It stored it all.
Yeah. It is crazy that people don't really realize how much of that. And I do that with the iPhone people. I make them go all the way through the location services and go down and show what that shows with the circles and the time, saying that's where you were for how long. And they're like, and it's like, don't worry. Tim says that, not you, Tim, but Tim for Apple, that, that's their data is not being shared. It's like, yeah, no, they're still using it.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, I'm Ed and I are probably on opposite sides of the spectrum on this one, right? I don't have a tinfoil hat. Look, this is why we have GDPR. This is why there will be regulation, because somebody's going to screw this up, and they're all going to get yelled at. No, for real, right? I say this again and again and again. That's
always Fox's fault, right?
Oh my God!
He's trusting.
So Tim,
He's so
with
cute, isn't he, Ed?
with that argument, I'm just not going to get inoculated since everyone else around me did. I'll be fine.
No. That's not what I'm saying. You're saying don't do it unwittingly. I'm saying do it wittingly. When you invent the ship,
but you're also hoping that you're
Tim?
assuming, though, that people will take care of you in the future. You're assuming that regulation will catch up.
Of
with
course
it.
he is. He's a baby boomer.
No. I'm not a baby boomer.
Tim, wait.
Don't put me in that.
Tim doesn't care. He is going to have a happy,
No, I care a
convenient,
lot.
seamless life where everything he wants to
I think we've crossed the bridge
happens, and it's
again.
gonna be great.
Wait, hold on. Would I get a Facebook portal right now? I absolutely would not, because Facebook has shown again and again and again that they are not a remotely trustworthy company when it comes to what they do with customer data.
But Google has.
No. Do I have an Android phone? I do not. Do I have a Google Home? I do not. But if you want to be connected in the world and actually do things, you have to let some of this technology into your life, and you have to recognize that these technologies have risks, right? The reality is that privacy has been dead for a long time, and the reality is that the absence of data is itself a signal. There's you want to read a fantastic book about this. Read the book Like War. It's spelled all one word with the hashtag symbol of it, right? So it's stylized as hashtag Like War, okay? And they actually have found data about all of the black sites that the CIA operate in various places that terrorists and folks, other militaries have found, based on the fact of all the spots where the Fitbits stop showing up, right? And where the phone signals stop up. And hey, there's this whole perimeter right here that is a black dot on the map, and that's where the people must be going.
It just turned into a black dot.
It's,
Oh my God.
I have to move to where I can plug in, or my laptop's going to die.
But
So I figured I'd save you from my walk.
my point is not don't get inoculated. My point isn't don't be smart about this. My point is recognize that this is a fact, and the fact that regulation will come along in some cases, and it will plug some holes, and then people will find the loopholes around the regulations like they always, right? This is the world we live in. You don't want to die in a car accident.
I'm gonna
Don't
show you
drive a
my
car.
secret
You don't want to die in a plane crash. Don't get on a plane. You don't want to fall down a flight of stairs. Don't ever leave your damn house. The fact is that this is the world in which we live in 2018.
Tim,
and
I'm going to
that's
show you my
probably
secret.
not going to change.
Tim, I'm going to show you my secret strategy. Quietly and covertly cultivate the career of a young girl with your identical name so that she turns into the focus of your name. And so they're chasing her, and they're going to ignore you completely because they think that there's nothing real about you.
No, wait, this is Lauren repositioning. Lauren actually misread doppelganger. That was like a German to English dictionary, and he didn't quite
whatever.
get it right. He was trying to
See,
get
I always thought it
doppelganger
was
right.
like a Hannah Montana thing, where like that was literally you when you just put
That's
on
where I
makeup.
got it
It
from.
is.
Don't get
Right,
this.
Right. Exactly.
They're going to ignore you because you can't be Lauren Gray. That's Lauren Gray. And I'm like, you're right. Go get her.
That's right.
But I mean, this is the world in which we live, right? Be smart about the products you use. Be smart about the technologies you use. Be smart. By the way, I'd like to be wearing an Apple Watch and wearing Bluetooth headphones right now. The fact of the matter is that data is being cataloged somewhere and being stored somewhere and is being used to identify you and all that. That's not going to change. You could not have Bluetooth.
Yeah.
headphones.
I'm on Tim's side on this one.
You paid for
just-
Bluetooth headphones.
With a wire.
You need to go. Yeah, you need to go get your money back. They did not sell you Bluetooth headphones.
Because they have a wire.
No,
you got to wire
I
them.
don't have Bluetooth headphones. That's
Oh, I see.
No,
Okay.
I'm saying Ed has Bluetooth headphones.
Oh,
I
Ed.
think I'm with Stuart. I think I'm with Tim. The same thing is that I selectively choose what it is I give. But the one line I know right now I'm keeping is biometric identification. I am really not wanting to share about it. I do not want anything that. I mean, I was even skeptical about the face recognition on the iPhone stuff. And
have you done a 23andMe or Ancestry?
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I have not. I have not, and I will not.
Ancestry
Hey,
is
mainly
guess
because
what? Hey,
some
Mr.
people are going to
Conspiracy
find
Theory
him.
has. We know that, right?
Yep.
Ed's done that.
Once I got the info I did, I ordered the destruction of it and the deletion of my profile.
And you're trusting
as
that
long-
they did that.
Yeah.
And you're
Well, I at
trusting
least
that
have
they did that.
recourse. I have recourse now if it
Right.
comes out they don't.
Correct.
That's-
the class
that's
action
because-
lawsuit will cut you
So-
a check for $1.50
So to be clear-
after the
so to be
lawyers take
clear-
their share.
No, I actually have resources, so I can just elect to not take part in the class action suit, wait for it to be settled, and then sue myself. Like,
That's,
By the way,
Um, but that's
background
exactly what I'm talking about with the risk of hotels putting these devices in the guest rooms where, correct me if I'm wrong, there are laws about the expectation of privacy that hotels have to follow.
Oh yeah, for
Sure.
sure.
So you turn
Right.
For
it
sure.
off by default. You inform the guest, and then they have to elect to turn it on. It's
Right, but
simple.
They have
how
to
many
elect to
hotels do
plug
you
it
think
in.
are actually doing that?
yeah. By signing this, you agree to the terms and conditions of this stay.
Well, remember too, there was a big change that happened recently about D&Ds. That the legality
Dragons?
value of what a D&D represents.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yes, Dungeons and Dragons. Didn't you ever play?
What is a
You gotta
D&D?
roll a 20 to get in the room. Come on, man.
Yeah, I don't know what.
TNC. A
Lauren,
TNC. I'm not
what's
sure
a D&D?
Do not disturb. Sorry.
Oh,
Do not
D&D.
disturb tags.
Oh, okay.
D&D, yeah, sorry, D&D, do not disturb tags on the doors. There was a legal value to those that got diluted recently by Hilton in the sense that they are not
Right.
an omission of people entering into the room should the
Right.
hotel deem it necessary to ensure the safety of the guest. They changed that. And,
Right.
and so now it doesn't stop staff from going into a room because before, if you put a do not disturb on your door and a staffer entered into the room, you actually had recourse with the hotel that they were in violation of your private space. You were renting that space as a temporary commodity from them, and it was considered private space. Now they've changed their ruling and says, no, it's not that. It's just a resistance to having a reason to get into the room unless there's a safety issue that we're concerned with.
Right.
Yeah. So the same
All
thing
right,
with the
gentlemen, I'm running out of time.
Yep.
I am
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Thank you all very much. This was
Six
awesome.
of us, and we did it in an hour and a half. That's good.
Man,
Good
you guys-
for everyone.
You all tangent.
So we'll run around the room real quick. Mr. Robert, if people want to know more about you and your amazing Twitter account,
No, you don't want to know about the Rock Cheetah Twitter account. Robert K. Cole on social media. That's a better one. Or rockcheetah.com.
excellent. And Mr. Tim Peters, sir, you and your podcast and stuff.
Tim Peter. You can find the podcast at timpeter.com/podcast. Tim Peter on most social networks except for Twitter, where I am sadly TC Peter.
And Mr. Ed,
Ed St. Ange on LinkedIn. Don't follow me on Twitter unless you want to see me troll college football. You can find out about
Hey,
Flip 2.
congratulations on making the playoffs.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, how did that happen?
Anyway, sorry, Ed. Go ahead.
I'll be glad to talk to you about it for hours. Flip 2 to learn about what we do for the travel sector, and Tim Peters' blog for more information on that. Fuel's blog for more information on that. You won't find information about me on Amazon or Google's
Or
blogs.
23andMe.
Or 23andMe. But if you do, please let me know, because I'd like to.
Maybe I'll soon.
Mr.
You're
Stewart.
1/16th not within the species. What is that, Ed?
That
It's not
explains a
Other-
lot.
It's not
Other-
surprising.
Yeah, explains a whole lot.
Mr. Stewart, sir. We're looking for
Yeah,
you
you
to
can
travel
find
business.
us anywhere you want to look at Fuel Travel. The podcast, we just did our 100th episode last week, is fueltravel.com/podcast. So check
And you're on what, 101 this week?
Yeah,
What
we're
is
actually recording this afternoon. I don't know what we're talking with Melissa.
It should be
our
educational.
analytics
It's
director, did it.
101.
Yeah, well,
Exactly.
Marketing 101 for the Fuel
There you go.
Podcast 101.
I might have to steal that joke.
Back to the basics.
Yeah, right.
That's good.
And Ms. Perini, where can they find about you?
Valen.Perini on most social media. And for Nor1, it's www.nor1.com.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone, again. And for those who are
Wait,
listening to us
and-
live, and for those that will listen to us on the
And
recording.
Tim's got a
And-
point, Mr.
Oh,
Gray.
sorry.
No.
Yeah.
Lauren hasn't said where we can find
Hospitality.
you.
For,
Lauren.
for this show and all previous 174 other shows, you can go to hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. It's a very short
It just
URL.
still went off because I only have 100 episodes. You got-
They're all there. It's just some of them look more archaic.
It's not the
It's
quantity
Robert
that
with
matters.
dark hair. Some of the early ones had Robert with dark hair, and he was wearing this little bow tie and collar like an Edison collar.
Some have
And
clip
they have no they have no audio. It's just
No,
piano
no.
music.
Exactly.
So look into the thing and turn the crank.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, the horse in the circus. Yeah. Anyway, thank
Exactly.
you all again. And hopefully we'll see you all on show number 176 next Friday, 11:30 Eastern. Until then, bye, everybody.